April 4th, 1968, Memphis, Tennessee. The air was thick, not just with the humidity of the South, but with a tension you could feel in your bones. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel, room 306. He was only 39 years old, but he carried the weight of an entire nation's conscience on his shoulders. He had come to Memphis to support black sanitation workers striking for dignity and fair pay. He was tired, he was under constant threat, but he was resolute. Little did the world know these were the final minutes of a man who had become the heartbeat of the American dream. To understand April 4th, you have to look at the night before. On April 3rd, Dr. King delivered what would be his final speech. "I've been to the mountaintop." It was eerie, almost as if he knew his time was running out. He told the crowded church, "I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." He spoke about not being afraid of any man, and that his eyes had seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. It wasn't just a speech, it was a farewell. He had accepted his fate long before the trigger was pulled. 6:01 p.m. The moment. Time stopped. The evening of April 4th started simply. Dr. King was getting ready for dinner at the home of a local minister. He stepped out onto the balcony to speak with his associates in the courtyard below. He jokingly asked a musician to play his favorite hymn, "Take My Hand, Precious Lord," at the meeting that night. Then, at exactly 6:01 p.m., a single sharp crack echoed through the air. It wasn't a firecracker. It was a bullet from a Remington rifle, fired from a rooming house across the street. The bullet struck Dr. King in the jaw, severing his spinal cord. He fell instantly. In that 1 second, the voice of non-violence was silenced by an act of ultimate violence. The scene that followed was pure heartbreak. His friends and aides rushed to his side, pointing toward the direction of the gunfire. The famous photograph of his associates pointing from the balcony captured the shock and the immediate search for the killer. Dr. King was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital, but the damage was too great. At 7:05 p.m., the world received the news it dreaded. Martin Luther King Jr. was dead. The man who taught the world to love was killed by a man filled with hate. When the news hit the streets, America didn't just mourn, it exploded. From Washington, D.C. to Chicago, riots broke out in over 100 cities. It was the greatest wave of social unrest the United States had seen since the Civil War. People were angry, frustrated, and hopeless. They felt that if the man of peace could be murdered, then perhaps peace itself was a lie. Smoke filled the skies of the Capitol, and the National Guard was called in to restore order. The very thing Dr. King spent his life trying to prevent, violence, was now tearing the country apart in the wake of his death. The manhunt for the killer was one of the largest in FBI history. 2 months later, a man named James Earl Ray was captured at London's Heathrow Airport. He was a fugitive and a white supremacist. Ray eventually pleaded guilty to the murder to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to 99 years in prison. However, for decades, many, including the King family, have questioned if Ray acted alone or if there was a larger conspiracy involved. Regardless of the theories, the fact remained: a giant had been fallen. The funeral in Atlanta was attended by tens of thousands. His body was carried on a simple wooden farm wagon pulled by 2 mules, symbolizing his commitment to the poor. But as the world watched him being lowered into the earth, they realized that while you can bury a man, you cannot bury an idea. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 was signed into law just days after his assassination, almost as a final tribute to his sacrifice. His death forced America to look into the mirror and decide what kind of nation it wanted to be. But the story didn't end with a funeral or a law. The bullet that struck Dr. King on that Memphis balcony left a hole in the heart of the American dream that we are still trying to fill today. His death was a painful reminder that progress often comes with a heavy price. Every time we see a community standing up for its rights, or a young person refusing to stay silent in the face of prejudice, we are seeing the ghost of April 4th. King's sacrifice forced the world to realize that equality isn't just a political goal, it is a human necessity. We are still looking into that same mirror he held up to us in 1968, asking ourselves, have we truly become the nation he dreamed of, or are we still sleeping through the revolution? We often talk about the dream, but on April 4th, we saw the cost of that dream. It wasn't just a political speech that ended that day. It was a father's hand that would never hold his children again. It was a husband's voice that would never again comfort his wife. When the bullet struck, it didn't just break a man's body. It tried to break the hope of a generation that believed the world could be better. But hate made a huge mistake that evening. By turning a leader into a martyr, it made his message untouchable. You can't kill a message that is written in the hearts of millions. The blood on that balcony in Memphis became a permanent stain on the conscience of America, a stain that can only be washed away by the continuous work of justice. Dr. King was often alone in his final days. He was being watched by the government, threatened by racists, and even questioned by his own friends who thought he was going too far by speaking against poverty and war. That balcony was a lonely place, but it was also a holy place. He stood there as a man who knew he was walking toward his own end, yet he didn't turn back. He chose to stay in Memphis, he chose to stand for the garbage collectors, and he chose to face the sniper's nest with his head held high. This is the part of the story that every American needs to understand. Greatness isn't just about the applause of the crowd. It's about the courage to stand for what is right when you are most alone. The man who pulled the trigger thought he was ending a problem, but he was actually starting a fire that would burn for decades. He thought he was silencing a voice, but he only made that voice loud enough to be heard in every corner of the earth. Today, when we look at the Lorraine Motel, we don't just see a place of death, we see a monument to the human spirit. The bullet missed its mark because it could not kill the dignity Dr. King gave to every person who had been told they were less than. The real victory of April 4th is that despite the violence, the message of non-violence won. It survived the rifle, it survived the riots, and it survives today in every heart that refuses to give up on the promise of equality. Conclusion: the echo of the balcony. The shot fired on April 4th, 1968, was intended to stop a movement, but it only made it immortal. Today, the Lorraine Motel is a National Civil Rights Museum, and Room 306 stands exactly as it did that evening. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died for the belief that all people are created equal and that love is the only force capable of turning an enemy into a friend. His journey ended on a cold balcony in Memphis, but his spirit continues to march in every heart that beats for justice. He proved that a life lived for others is a life that never truly ends. If you're inspired by Dr. King's legacy, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel, where I'm dedicated to bringing you the true stories behind the powerful life and journey of Martin Luther King Jr. Don't forget to hit the bell icon and share this video to help keep the dream alive. Thanks for watching.